Okay, I'm ready. My full name is Patricia Jane Thompson. Day is my married name, of course. And I think Jane came from Jane Sheehy, my mama's friend in Ohio. And I have no idea where Patricia came from other than looking back in my dad's genealogy stuff. I think I found a relative that was a Patricia, but I have no idea. I was never told. I was born in March 9th, 1940 at 92 Burley Circle, Green Hills, Ohio, which is now a suburb of Cincinnati. Going with the neighbor down in the backyard of that house, the big boys went down and played in what they called the beech, B-E-E-C-H, which was a forest back behind our house. And I played with an older neighbor girl, and I had a little deer that probably had been a brooch at one time. And I remember kind of like a Bambi thing, playing with it in moss. And I also remember having a little, what would have been a painted turtle, and his name was Jerry, and he died, and he was buried under the drain spout at 92 Burley Circle. And I left there when I was 5. To Tampa, Florida. Dad moved us all to 308 East Jean Street, Tampa, Florida. That's where I grew up. Well, it was after the war. Daddy he was a metal machinist, probably during war efforts, and all the GIs came home. Probably didn't need all these people working to make ships and planes. I am assuming that Dad just decided there was more opportunity in Florida, and he had been to Florida. My mother was an angel, my father was the devil. Mother was working in Chillicothe, Missouri, not too far from where she grew up, with maybe a sister had gone with her. I don't know what kind of work they were doing because they were farm girls. Don't know why my dad was there, but I know that they met and I know that they married in that area. I'm not sure if they married in Chillicothe or went down closer to a church that my mother had attended as a child. That I do not know. And I don't exactly know the year they got married. My brother's 7 years older than me. They were probably married a year or so before he came, so 36, 32. Maybe in the 1930s. I just don't know. Late 20s. Fun. Everybody had fun. I grew up in the 50s. We moved there in 45, so I started elementary school, and my street dead-ended into Seminole Elementary School. So what was it, 9 houses up the road. We played in the streets. We played stickball. We played with the girls. We played pick-up sticks and jacks. And when I got tired of the girls, we played with the boys and played in the street. We played ball. And in later elementary school, we went to the school playgrounds, which was supervised play. There was baseball, basketball, volleyball, dodgeball, and we were all barefooted. Nobody ever wore shoes, and we were running on the shell playgrounds because that's all there was in Florida then. There wasn't asphalt and concrete, and our feet were really, really tough. My next door neighbor who had 4 children, but they went to the Catholic school. She says, Jane, I don't even think you're going to get married with shoes on. I did. Well, I know they sent me off to church for Christmas, Easter, whatever. I don't remember any specific things. We always had wonderful Thanksgiving dinner, beautiful Christmas dinners. Mother always used her good china, her good glassware, her good silverware that was always kept in the china cabinet during the year. My dad was so ornery. I don't remember traditions per se. I don't remember them ever going to church with me. And I know that I started out at the Methodist church, which was across the street from the elementary school. And then when I was a little older and had teenage friends, I went to the Baptist church. I was baptized in the Baptist church, but I think I was also baptized in the Methodist church. So some of that I don't remember anymore. But it was a lot of fun. You got out of school, you crossed the street, and there was a little store, and we could go in and we could buy penny candy. Everything was, if you found a nickel or a bottle and take it and get the deposit, you were rich. And there was cups of ice cream, and when you pulled the paper, of course, you pulled the paper lid off, there was a picture of a movie star, but their pictures were blue. I don't remember why their pictures were blue. And I suppose the boys at that time were collecting baseball cards. I do not ever remember doing baseball cards. Steak and potatoes and green beans and corn. I think we had pork chops sometimes. Mother made wonderful roast. And what was left over from the roast, she ran it through her hand meat grinder, and she put pickles and probably mayo in it. And I don't know what else, but I remember that was so good. That was probably the best sandwiches we ever had, was after we had a roast. There was a Wholesome Bakery, this was a tradition. Wholesome Bakery had open house on Christmas time, and you went through and you saw how they made bread, and they gave everybody a little tiny loaf of bread about this big to take home with them. We could smell the bakery from our house. It was made you want to go eat more bread. We had all kinds of citrus fruit, but other fruits were very expensive, so it was a rare treat to get a plum. I don't even remember having grapes, but we had 2 avocado trees, a pecan tree, an orange tree, a tangerine tree, all in our yard. And the neighbors had grapefruit and lemon trees, so we were never without. In fact, we used the green fruit in our slingshots that we built. Houses were all not on stilts, but they were elevated where you'd have a crawl space under them. We'd crawl underneath there and use tire inner tubes to make slings, and we'd shoot them back and forth at each other's houses. There were 3 boys next door and 1 girl. So the boys and the neighborhood girls were all the same age. We had some terrific battles. We used to climb the tangerine tree. When the boys came home from school, we threw tangerines at them. We also climbed the neighbor's pecan tree on top of my garage, and we jumped off the garage. And if you weren't brave enough to jump off the garage, we probably never played with you again. The girls and the boys the girls were tomboys, and the boys didn't seem to think, oh, you're girls, we can't play with you, like you see in movies and things. It was never like that. We were all friends. Corkball was fun, which is stickball, but you shoot a cork, wrap a cork with adhesive tape, and you shoot it, and they hit it with a broomstick. Fun game. Not great. We walked to school, which wasn't bad, except it rained every day at 3 o'clock when we got out. The junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And it was right across the street from the high school. It was maybe a mile from the house. It wasn't far. And everybody walked. We didn't have book bags. If we were taking a book home, we just carried it. It got wet, if it got wet. I can't remember my friends, only the friends that were friends from elementary that were then friends in junior high, and the different elementaries then fed into that junior high, so there was always a lot of new people. I remember I wanted to be a cheerleader, and I was very shy, very shy. And I remember being brave enough to get up on that stage and try out for cheerleader. And I didn't make it, but a girl with the same last name as me did. And she was ugly. But I don't know, she might have been easy because she got to be a cheerleader and I did not. And I was never in with the popular group. The groups that came from the elementary just kind of continued on through. High school then, we moved across the street. When you were in the 10th grade, you were known as a rat, and you had lipstick rat written on your forehead, and there was a little beady hat, which I do believe I still have, and I know that in this desk I have a pencil from my high school with football on it. Had good friends that I had met probably in junior high, not particularly elementary school, but they lived close by. And I don't remember a lot about that. I was terrible shy. I mean, I studied, I made good grades, and I played sports. Sports compared to now was nothing. We had volleyball. The girls had to dress in the gym, and I was probably like most boys. My God, to take my clothes off and take a shower was devastating. I was 5'8" in the 7th grade. So I was always taller than most of the boys, skinny, and I think I had a bad attitude maybe. It was rough. Had some boyfriends, nothing too red hot until the 11th grade. I met a guy I really liked. We dated. Robert Eugene Longworth, April 7th, 1940. Bobby is an interesting case. I loved his parents. He went to a different junior high. And then we met, we had Latin together. If you wanted to do college preparatory, you had to take a language. Why at the time somebody didn't urge Spanish, I don't know, but if you were going to nursing school, you had to take Latin. That was the dumbest thing I ever had to take. But Bob was in that class, and then he was also in my chemistry class, and I would not have made it through chemistry without him. I hated chemistry. We were lab partners. He also drove down the street that went to the school, and he picked me and Mary Alice up and took us to school for 2 years of high school. So it was just natural to finally date him. And he was going to go up to Gainesville. He was going to be a dentist. His mother wanted him to be a doctor. He didn't want to be either one. He was quite an artist. He did pinstriping on cars. Just gorgeous. I'd go with him and watch him do that. It was fun. We were with our other friends who were the same age, the same interests. We didn't drink, we didn't smoke. We were probably pretty boring. And we graduated from high school. We did 2 proms together, which was fun. And we were engaged Christmas of 1958 after graduating 58. And in June of 59, he broke it off. And so for over 60 years, I wondered why, because he never said, I never could get an answer. And not too long ago, after Byron died, I got a letter from him. I would like to talk to you. There's some things I want to tell you. I thought, oh boy, now I'm going to find out why. And he gave me his phone number and he says, if you feel like talking, give me a call. Well, I kind of fiddled around with it for a while, and then one day I decided I would call and see how he was doing. He was just a typical man after losing a wife, and I had just lost Byron, and I thought the conversation was a little strange at times, but he told me about his folks and about his kids and everything, and then he said something like, I want to tell you why. He says, I've only loved 2 women in my life. The first one was you, and the second one was Judy. And he said, I have to tell you what a mistake I made breaking up with you. He said, I was young and I was stupid. And I said, that's it? I mean, in 60 years' time, I had envisioned a lot of different scenarios. That was not one of them. But I can see that. He did not like university. He quit. Word I got was that he was homesick. I don't know, but he was really upset that he had broken up with me, and I kind of felt he was being genuine about it, and he didn't know that Byron had just passed away until I told him. So there were 3 other couples, and we all remained friends for a long time. They always told me, don't worry about him, he wasn't worth it. And then I met Ed, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. Elvis Presley, Tampa Armory, wiggling his hips. Now, I will not say my parents wouldn't let me go, because I probably just didn't ask. I didn't like to go to things like that. But there was lots of rock and roll. Everly Brothers and the Earth Angel. The music was terrific. One boyfriend gave me a record player, a 45, so I could play records in my room, which was awesome, and stick that little thing in the center of them so that they'd fit on the turntable. My mother probably sold that. I don't remember whatever happened to it. And she must have sold my dolls, because I never saw them again. Poodle skirts, crinolines. We wore skirts to school. We didn't wear blue jeans to school. We didn't wear shorts to school. So a dress or a skirt, skirts seemed to be quite popular. The Villager brand is one I remember. And Mary Alice had a long skinny foot, and she got to wear Capezio shoes that were just darling. My shoes, her shoes came from Moss Brothers and were expensive. My shoes came from Baker's and they weren't expensive. Sandals, we wore sandals all winter long, just wore black ones after Labor Day. Maybe when my first patient died. I've never thought about that. Going to nursing school was the best thing that ever happened in my life. I went to nursing school and met girls, and we were the in group. We were smart, and we were athletes, and we had fun. And, golly, it was... I went from Tampa to Orlando to nursing school, Orange Memorial Hospital School of Nursing, in September of '58. Previously, Mother and her friend had taken me over to have my physical, and I don't remember taking any tests, but it must have been a medical kind of test, because they were going to cover us for anything we had wrong with us. And probably to look at us, see what we look like and everything else. You started out in classes, and the buildings were real old, and each building had a name. I wasn't thrilled with the building that I was in after I met these other girls that I was so crazy about. were in different buildings. And eventually I got into the buildings with them. And these are still the three ladies that I have met over the years. One of them it was five ladies, one passed away. We took tests. We had to go to junior college and for psychology and chemistry. If you'll recall, I didn't do well in chemistry, but it didn't really matter because we all got the same grade, because every time we walked into his class, which maybe was either 2 or 3 times a week, we sang happy birthday to him. He didn't know what to do with this group of young ladies. I don't remember the psychology class either. I just know we rode a bus there. And we had anatomy and physiology, and that is a fun story. I took anatomy and physiology my junior year in high school. Mr. Matthews was one tough son of a gun. And so my senior year, I just was his student assistant and sat in on the classes. I go to nursing school. Of course, it's going to be the same book. The Gray's Anatomy is what everybody used, I'm sure. We had our first anatomy and physiology test, and afterwards, before we got the test results back, Miss Thompson, you need to go to the nursing director's office, and Miss Raby was the head nursing teacher. Oh God, what have I done? Most people were just scared to death of Miss Raby. I liked her. Anyway, we get in the office. Miss Thompson, have you taken this test before? I said, no, ma'am. But she said, you did use this book. Your teacher didn't use the standard test. And I said, no, ma'am, he was a lot harder than that. I said, there were no yes and no questions or ABCs. You wrote everything out, as in every bone in the body, every muscle, every insertion. Oh, Miss Thompson, please help the other girls. I had scored 100. I said, well, thank Mr. Matthews. And I did go back to visit the folks and went down to school and told him. He thought that was just hilarious, It did get harder. But you grow up when you're giving baths. Early on, you're giving baths and back rubs and change the bed, get them out of bed and whatever. Very simple stuff. But sometimes those patients die. And my first patient was 21 years old and he died of lung cancer. And he had a wife and child. I suspect that's probably when you say, I think I must be a grown-up now because I've seen death. I saw my grandfather dead, but that's all of death I'd ever been around. When I was in nursing school, the first half of the class went to New Orleans for psychiatry and pediatrics, Charity in St. Paul. First, they went the last 6 months of their junior year, and we went the first 6 months of our senior year. Well, while we were away, they took all our boyfriends, of course, and so we get back just in time for Christmas, so we were off for a little bit and went home and then went back to school. Well, there were no boyfriends, but the Air Force guys would call, who wants a blind date? Somebody to answer the hall phone, because we didn't have phones. Who wants a blind date? I said, I do. I said, how tall is he and what does he drive? Now, what in the world, I asked, what's he drive? I have no idea, because I don't ever recall that before. He was 6 feet tall and he drove an Austin Healey sports car. I didn't know what an Austin Healey was, but he was 6 feet tall. I'll go. We had the best time. We went to some hamburger drive-in, and that would have been January, and we dated a few times. We went to the Daytona Beach. He fried chicken. It was raw in the middle. The pelicans flew over and pooped on the blanket. And then February rolled around and he had to go to Reno for survival school. That's at least 2 weeks. He had a wreck on the way in Sasquatch, the little town there in Colorado. He was put in jail, got out of jail, went on to Reno, finished survival school, and it was in Reno. And so when he came back, it was my birthday, the 9th of March, somewhere around there. He had brought me back a 1921 silver dollar, and that was my year to turn 21 years old. So we dated steadily, and then somewhere we decided we were going to get married in September after I graduated, and he got orders to go to Lockbourne in Ohio for B-47s, the same thing he was in at McCoy. And we decided we'd move our wedding up. I didn't want him to get away. I liked him. And so we got married July the 8th of 61. And we had a little apartment for, I don't know, 2-3 weeks before he had to leave. And then I was back in the dorm. We graduated, I don't know, probably the 16th, 17th, somewhere along that of August. My mom and dad came up for that, and I stayed in Florida for a little while, and then I flew to Ohio, I guess, and had to come back to Florida for state boards in October, I want to say. I passed my state boards and flew back to Ohio, and the rest is all history. I was in the Army Reserve before I met him, and so I had an obligation to fulfill with that. So I was stationed in Fort Jay, New York. New Year's Eve we spent in Times Square, New York, and I was stationed on that little island, Fort Jay, across the street from the prison, which was a 200-year-old brick building from the whatever. And the nurses were all majors or us fresh lieutenants. And my bathroom mate, because there was a bathroom between 2 rooms, she had been in the Bataan Death March. It was very interesting. They never got promoted above major. That's all changed since. But it was the Army Nurse Corps. And then I got pregnant so I could get out. And the rest is pretty much history with Mike, Tom, and Tim. He was tall. He drove an Austin Healey, for heaven's sakes. My brother was an Air Force pilot. He was a fighter pilot, which didn't make any difference. I just knew he would be fun because my brother had brought guys, and I was too young to date any of them. But they were always fun to have at the house. They always had a good time. Mom and Dad were thrilled to have them visit. And I thought, there's nothing wrong with that kind of a life. So we just enjoyed each other's company a lot. He was nice. He was always nice. I don't remember him ever getting mad. I don't remember ever having an argument. Certainly was dedicated to what he was doing. He was always good to me, that's for sure. Little. Mom and I went and got a dress. It was a beautiful dress. And Ed had been raised Catholic. His mother, Maybella, insisted we get married in a Catholic church, so I had to go do catechism classes for a little bit. And I wanted to get married in a little church in Sulphur Springs, which wasn't my diocese. I knew nothing about diocese. My diocese was a huge cathedral downtown Tampa. There was no way that me and Ed and his best man and my maid of honor were going to be the only people in this church, with a handful of his mother and my friends and parents. And so we managed to get permission to get married in the little Sulphur Springs chapel, which was just perfect. It was hot, July hot, no air conditioning. I can remember that. I remember the pictures that we have of coming out of the church. I remember that he was you may kiss the bride, and I had to wipe the sweat off his face to give him a kiss. And then we went out, and it was fun, and the reception was at my mom's house. She and some friends had fixed up whatever it is that you do, a cake and everything. And then we jumped in the Austin Healey and drove over to the beach, because we both had 4th of July time off. So we got to spend a week honeymoon, Treasure Island, Thunderbird Motel on the beach at Treasure Island. We had fun. We always had fun. We liked the same things. They were all so fun. Mike was the perfect little boy. He was so cute. He wouldn't eat peas and he wouldn't eat potatoes. Tom was the perfect image of his dad. He was a good little boy. Mike called him Go-Go Baby. Tom was Go-Go Baby for a long, long time. Tim we were going to have 2 children in an accident, and the accident happened 11 months after Tom. And during that time we were in California, and Ed was in B-52s then, and I knew I was pregnant, but when we left Beale to go to this 6-month school, nobody else knew. So when we came back, here's this, what happened? And he was born the 23rd of February, where everybody else was born in March. And I told the doctor, I had a babysitter at the house. Ed was on alert, which is where Ed always was when kids were born. And the doctor says, you can't leave. I says, I have to leave. I have a babysitter and I'm supposed to buy milk. I mean, that was important. You can't leave. We'll call Captain Day or whatever he was and let them know that he needs to get things ready and organized or whatever, because I certainly didn't have any clothes to take to the hospital. I just went for an exam. I said, I can't have this baby. I need to wait until March. You're not going to be waiting for this baby. And he was born pretty quick, and he was always naughty. Timmy was the naughtiest of all, but they were all kind and good like their dad. I don't remember them having huge fights. I enjoyed having them. They got themselves ready for school and let me sleep. I do like to sleep. Nobody was ever in trouble. I don't ever remember being called to school because of a problem. We were in Italy, and they had all were just in early elementary school, and I did get called in, both of us. Mike or Tom, maybe both, needs speech therapy. And I said, why? And they explained about water and something else. And I said, they don't need speech therapy. We just came from Alabama. You know, they're in school in Alabama, and they're talking like those kids in Alabama. And it was hysterical, because we couldn't understand what the little boys were saying who were playing with them there. The kid said he needed a ladder. And it says, what are you going to do with the ladder? No, a ladder to light a cigarette with. And it was so bad that one of the doctors, it's just a joke, because that truly was what happened. We go to the doctor one day, and he was talking about the wad. Ed looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, I don't know what a wad is. Wad. Where are you from? Alabama. So I think they did a little bit of speech therapy, and I don't think it took too long to get over the Alabama accent. But there were funny times, and they were such good boys for most of the time. It was only Timmy who did naughty things, and that was Tim. He's turned out to be the best father and husband you could ask for. Getting out of bed and taking care of them. The boys got nursed for a little bit, but not for a long time, because if they go on the bottle, Ed could get up and feed them in the middle of the night. Being a mom, probably. Being a mom, being a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse my whole life. I don't know why, but I did. Being a good Air Force wife was an achievement that was probably most important, because it helped Ed. We enjoyed being in the Air Force. We would have stayed longer, but they didn't give him the job that he was supposed to get, and so he went ahead and retired at 20 years. And it was, it was always fun, even after we got out, and we loved being in the Black Hills and being outdoors and having the boys, and the boys were away at college by then. I don't know what the training planes were. You probably started out in a propeller, because I didn't meet him until he was already trained in the B-47. So he was in Georgia just before I met him, and that was flying whatever the jet trainer is. And by the way you finished class is how you got the selection of what you were going to fly. And he didn't get fighters, which everybody wants to be a fighter pilot, for heaven's sakes. And he got the B-47, and he flew that. He enjoyed it, and he enjoyed the crew. It was not until after he was finished flying and maybe even retired that I even heard the stories about it. Was a Widowmaker, because apparently a lot of them crashed, but he flew them from 61 to May of 63, and that's when we went to California for B-52s. And he volunteered. He didn't want to fly B-52s in Guam, and he volunteered to go to RF-4 training in Idaho. And he flew RF-4s out of Thailand during the Vietnam era. And then he went back to B-52s, and he became a ops officer. He was a lieutenant colonel then. That's what he retired from. He didn't get the squadron commander job. The men were all very upset. Ed's crew, the other pilots and men, they all loved Ed. He was just a good pilot and a good man, and that's all real important. And it was just at the time that Ed went into aviation cadets from college, as opposed to going to the Air Force Academy, which graduated its first class somewhere close to the same time that he was probably in B-47s. And so some of those grads were fast-tracked by either fathers who were generals or knew somebody, a senator or whatever. And they gave that squadron to a fast-track academy grad. That hurt Ed awful bad. That was bad. That was really bad. Everybody was so upset. They were so looking forward to him having the squadron. And then they wanted to send him to Fort Worth, Texas to be a safety officer. And he said, no, I'm not doing that. And so we retired in Rapid City and stayed on another 5, 6, maybe longer years living in Rapid City, which we liked. And he flew a Beechcraft, I don't know, King Air, Beechcraft King Air, privately for a corporation while we were in Rapid City. After that, he didn't fly anymore. We moved to Texas. I take that back. He flew they bought a tail dragger to fly into Wyoming to the oil fields. The same company. You get old, you know a lot of stuff. I've told you before, Grandma has wisdom.
Yes.
Patience has always been the hardest thing in my life. I'm muchly improved in patience, but I'm nowhere near where a person should be. Stress reduces patience and brings on anger, which is leftover baggage from childhood. But I am more patient. And I'm not so hard on me anymore, maybe. And you dump the bad stuff. A long time ago, I forgave my dad for everything that he did that was mean. And that was really hard to do. I told him, I said, Daddy, I forgive you what you've done to me. And that was after my psychiatric nursing, after I was out working. But I can't forgive you for Mama, because she's the one who got hurt the most by it, and my brothers. And so I was more at ease then, because what he did to all of us, you don't get rid of for a long, long time until you reach that point that you can say, okay, that's gone, we don't do that anymore. And then when the bad things happen in your adult life, you finally reach a point where, those have got to go too. Those have got to go also. You just say, I don't want to think about you anymore, and you don't. You go on to stuff that makes you happy. And that doesn't always happen either, but you work on taking care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. When you reach a certain point, if you don't take care of yourself, mind and body, you're going to die. It is not easy being old. And Grandma Dorothy. She was a fighter, So it's, I'm thrilled to have all the grandkids, and especially thrilled now to have the great-grandboys. I wish I could see them sooner, but circumstances have prevented that. But it'll happen. Faith probably is first. You gotta believe in something, higher power. I don't care which one it is. I don't care if it's a tree, but you have to have that above all else. You need love. You need love for yourself first. Love for other people. Being kind and being around kind people's important, and that's hard. Friends are very important, and we had really, really good friends in the Air Force for years and years and years. So it's money's right up there, because it does help with the happiness, but the happiness, I guess I learned that in the Air Force. There were so many Air Force wives. They hated every assignment. We loved all our assignments. It's strictly attitude. And they made their lives miserable, just miserable. I don't need a miserable life. So I've been pretty happy with everything. There have been low times, but there's been super duper high times too. Everything. How to count change, how to read cursive, how to read a clock that's not digital. How not to treat your parents. Respect your parents, respect your brothers and sisters, respect other people in restaurants. And that goes back to the parents have got the problem, not the kids. I don't know whether it was when some of those doctors came along and said you can't spank your kids and you can't do this and you can't do that, and kids have just become rotten. Cell phones should all be thrown away. The internet should be tossed. Isn't it a shame we can't all go back and live in the 50s? Because it was fun. We drank out of the hose, and we didn't die. And we stayed out after dark. And we came home when the street light came on. And nobody kidnapped us. And nobody killed us. It was totally different life. It's sad. It's sad to see how coddled children are now. Oh my God, that's a choking hazard. Well, you take them to the doctor and get it out, You have to play. Do they have to stick their finger in the socket? Maybe. Let the children be children. Getting out of the Air Force, becoming civilians was different. Not having friends around. Texas is a unusual place to live if you aren't Texan. I found them to have absolutely no humor. I mean, they weren't used to a sarcastic comment that is totally meant in humor. They have no grasp of that kind of humor. That was really hard because we went first to Jacksonville, Texas. Ed's workplace was there, but I said, I'm not living in the tomato capital of the world. Nasty little town. And so we lived in Tyler, Texas, which was fine. And I did have three nice friends that I met through Women's Club. But it was hard there, really, really hard there. Then we moved to Houston into neighborhoods and just weren't friends with the neighbors, which is something we had always had. I think the lack of friends who had something at least in common, kids or anything in common, and their lack of humor. I'm sure Mike can talk about it too, because it's not just me. Because first time I went back to work as a nurse was in Tyler, Texas. And if I didn't word something right to the LPN who would be under me to do something, or an aide, when I had my first evaluation, is instead of saying, please would do this, I guess I was saying, could you do something for Mr. So-and-so, please? The please was at the end instead of me. Well, that's the way I talked. So my valuation was down because of that. And I'm going, well, I'm sorry. Of course, then I was a Yankee, because it didn't matter if I was raised in Florida. I was still not from Texas. And that was hard. But I was good at what I did. And I liked it. I liked working there because I was working orthopedics. So whether the people around me appreciated me or not, I don't know. And I really didn't care at that point. Just do the job, make the money, so we could buy a house. It didn't exactly happen to me. It happened to Ed. Ed drank too many martinis at a Christmas party in Idaho at somebody's house. His classmates for the RF4. He got up from the bar stool. The bar stool was at their counter, and he fell into their Christmas tree. He was covered in angel hair from the tree. So I had to take all his clothes off and put a bucket by the side of the bed because I knew he was going to throw it. He hated me telling that story, but that was probably one of the funniest things that ever happened I'll have to say us, because I don't recall any super funny thing happening to me other than, falling down or doing stuff like that. Care for Ed when he was sick towards the end. It was hard, it was brave, had to be brave. I promised him that I would be with him sickness and health, and I promised him that I'd take care of him to the end once we knew. He knew that he had dementia beginning, so he knew what the future held, and it wasn't good. And after the last 6 months was the hardest. And when the hospital bed came to the living room so we could look out at the trees, that was 2 weeks, hardest 2 weeks of my life. Losing him was tough. I was glad that he passed away, and that worried me that I was glad. And I went to see a psychologist and discussed it. And I was fortunate enough that her father was also in late stage dementia, so she sort of knew what I was going through. She says, don't worry about saying I'm glad he passed, because you're glad for him and you're glad for himself. But I was worried what people would say. I've always kind of been worried about what friends and people would say about stuff you did or something. And I didn't want to say I'm glad he's finally gone in any way, shape, or form, say it, and have them think that I was glad he was gone. I was glad that Ed was gone. I miss Ed terrible, and I know that people don't understand that, but I don't even think about the sick Ed. He wasn't it. He's not there. Man, I love that guy. He was perfect. Well, you met Byron. Well, I was lonely. Byron was good to me. Obviously, very good to me. But when Byron passed away, I was also glad he was gone, because he was in tremendous pain. But it wasn't the same. My heart didn't hurt. Mikey was there when his dad passed, and Trudy. Oh golly, where did that come from? Mercy. And Tim and Beth and the kids came. Tom didn't come. So when I say I miss Dad, I miss him. I miss that good guy. He was a great companion. The day my mama died, the night that I made it to her bedside and I didn't stay with her that night and she was gone the next morning. That would probably be the major thing in my life that would be different. Hopefully that I was a good person, even though I'm a bitch. Underneath being my dad's daughter, there's got to be a good person in there somewhere. I think it's important to give. I do, and I've really tried to do that, to give support, whatever is needed, even total pain strangers, they're counting their change because they can't pay for their groceries, and you just pay for the groceries. It's giving somebody a hug. I can't tell you the number of people that I've just hugged because they simply needed to have a hug. And maybe you find that out when you've gone through what we went through with Ed. You can see their eyes and you know that somebody is really in need of a hug. And through the hurricanes, that's really been emphasized about the giving. And I was a good nurse. I'm proud of being a good nurse. And I'm proud of being a good wife and mother. It's not all smooth sailing. It's hard. Life is hard. Life's really hard. Seems to get harder after your children leave home. And I did the same thing to my mother. What are we? We're in South Dakota. Mother's in Florida. Ed gets 2-week vacation. How do you go see your mother? Everybody just doesn't go jump on a plane like they do now. So my mother didn't get to see the kids as often as she probably wanted to. And I can't get to see all you guys as often as I'd like to. But that's just the way it is. That's what happens with distance. That's what's different in Texas. They don't even leave the county they're in. That's every relative they've ever had is still in the same county, and the only reason they go across the line is to buy booze. I love you, and I think it's nice you did this. It's hard. I knew that we were finally going to get to a question that made me cry. Just had to.